We are in Holyoke, Massachusetts, in the North High Street Historic District. We're in the block in Essex Street, and we're trying to look at a couple of old buildings across the street now. And this is important because the YMCA used to be at the very edge. We already covered that, so we're not going to swing back to it. But it's important because what we're looking at was a former YMCA building. The building that has a brick that's not very bright, it was painted white and it flecked off. But that building is important because that used to be the YMCA building before volleyball was invented. So volleyball was invented in 1895. That building we're looking at was made in 1884, and as of 1886 it became a YMCA building. And then they moved up a few years later to the one in the corner that is gone now. So sadly, the one where volleyball was invented is gone, but the one that YMCA started or had once is still in place. It's a nice looking building. You can see the slate roof on the very, very top of it. Okay, now that building is next to one that's called the Rigali building. And Louis Rigali owned both the buildings. He had the one that's on the two old ones. He had the one that's on the right from 1887, but he used to own the one on the left from 1884. He moved over to the right and he made it more beautiful, and so he had two buildings going at the same time. And he wanted to have a nicer one. He was getting richer and richer. He owned a candy store on the ground floor, and that's what he sold, and he lived on one of the upper floors. And of course, those are all residential on the upper floors. You can see the architectural element is very nice looking on the right side of that right apartment. Now, as we go through, you might see that there's two old buildings, some modern buildings right in there. There's three modern buildings in a row. Well, actually, the one that has the Art Deco look to it, that is not as modern as it might seem. But anyways, these buildings are called the Dollar Building, and then one I never found this name, and then the Mud Block. The Mud Block used to be higher, and it was just taken down, get lower, and they put a new facade on it. So it looks very new, but actually it's probably from about 1880. Okay, now we're sweeping to the last part of this block, and it's three similar sized two-story blocks, and then a four-story one that has Oscar Biel on it. At one time it was Oscar Biel, it was a third Oscar Biel home in Holyoke. And those blocks all have names to it. There's the Fitzsimmons block, first with the green middle trim, all right, that Fitzsimmons block. And next to it was the Hoffney block, the Hoffy block, and then next to that was the Lynch block. And the Lynch block, you can see that it probably was a lot higher in the past, and you can tell that by looking at the wall that's on the right hand side of the older one, right? And you can see, and I looked it up, it was a four-story block at one time. And then if you look to the last one with the Oscar Biel sign in, the still four floors high, that's the Ducharme block. Now what happened was that by the 19-teens and 1920s, he got a new owner, and what he did was he joined the block that was taller, brought it down because it was damaged, and then the block to his right, he joined together with a new facade. It's not very nice looking, but those have been joined together because they had the same owner. And if you look at the very bottom, the ground floor has a joined storefront. It used to be Dorothy Dodd's, a woman's clothing store during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then they left a joint facade on buildings that don't look very similar because they were joined by purpose later in life. On the very end, we already covered that. That's the Conway block where pianos used to be sold and so forth. Okay, so we're going to do one across the street from here that's more and more beautiful buildings, but this is pretty decent, and it's well into this neighborhood's North and High Street district. Thank you for coming on this tour.